Hi, I'm Kelly Cervantes, and this is Seizing Life, a biweekly podcast produced by Cure Epilepsy. Recently, Cure Epilepsy announced a strategic partnership with Epilepsy Canada. In honor of this partnership and in celebration of Epilepsy Awareness Month in Canada, we speak with Brittany and Alek Stewart in Meaford, Ontario, Canada. Alek was diagnosed with epilepsy at 16 years old. He suffered from 1 or 2 tonic-clonic seizures per year until his mid-20s, when an accident dramatically affected his seizure activity. Alek and his wife Brittany are here to tell their story with epilepsy and how they have come to partner with Epilepsy Canada to raise funds for awareness and research. Brittany, Alek, thank you so much for joining us today. Truly appreciate you sharing your joint story with us. Alek, tell us about your first seizure and your journey to a diagnosis.
So my first seizure happened when I was 16 years old. I had a few friends sleeping over. I woke up the next morning with very little sleep, and I was laying in bed, and I all of a sudden just kind of lost control of my left arm, and it was a very weird sensation, I guess. I didn't know what was going on, and then all of a sudden my left arm just started to lift in the air, and the next thing I remember is my brother waking me up and taking me to the hospital. And then after several appointments with neurologists and my general practitioner, it was then determined I was diagnosed with epilepsy. So,
Were you able to gain control early on with medications? How was the time shortly after?
yeah, it was actually, as far as my case goes, it was, I guess, as good as you could ever ask for. The first medication I was prescribed was Epivel, and I was on that for about 3 or 4 years, and only suffering 1 to maybe 3 tonic-clonic seizures per year. And in my case, I thought it was great. So I just kind of went from there. And as I moved along, it's about a 4-year period of being on Epivel and just suffering those 1 to 3 seizures per year. I all of a sudden had this influx of, it was about 10 or 15 seizures over the course of 2 weeks. And it kind of came out of the blue, and we didn't really know what to do. So it was just another appointment with the epileptologist at that point, and they prescribed me on lamotrigine, where it was again under control for a couple other years. So.
And how did your diagnosis, your seizures affect you socially, emotionally? Because those are pretty formative and pivotal years. You're
Yeah.
16 years old, getting a diagnosis, young adult, finding your way in the world. Meanwhile, you're navigating a chronic illness.
Sure. Yeah. So physically, that was the easy part, was the bumps and bruises, but the emotional and the social anxiety and just emotion that I would get from not only the seizure itself, not after post-ictal state. It was just knowing that I could have a seizure, and at that point, going through adolescence in high school, and if you're going to hang out with friends or go to parties, or at least I did, I always had that in the back of my mind where I might have a seizure in front of them, and none of my friends at that point that I was aware of had ever suffered a seizure. So the last thing I wanted to do was to suffer one in front of them, and then have them deal with that. Because I mean, as many people know, a tonic-clonic seizure it can be pretty scary to witness, especially for the first time. So it was a pretty dark period of my life for the first few years. And again, going through adolescence, that's one of the last things you want to think about is dealing with some type of invisible illness. So.
Now, did you talk to your friends at all about your diagnosis? What did you know about epilepsy? Were you in a position that you could educate them?
No, I wish I could have. I was more focused on just being a kid. So epilepsy was, even though it was like obviously very intertwined with my life, at that point. I was just focused on being a teenager and having fun and high school and college, and that was really it. Um, and because of my lack of knowledge, or maybe it could have just been out of, I don't want to say embarrassment, but I'm assuming lack of knowledge is the only thing that I can think of at this point, is the reason I really only kept it to close family and friends. So very few people, including my wife that we went to high school together, she wasn't even aware of the situation.
So, Brittany, when did you learn about Alek's epilepsy? I know you guys went to high school together. You actually knew each other long before
Yeah.
that.
So I actually didn't find out that he even suffered with epilepsy until I was on my way home from the airport. My sister and I went on a trip to Europe together, and her boyfriend at the time was somehow found out that Alek had suffered these string of seizures in about a week. And I hadn't really talked to him that much, other than a little like, hey, how's it going? And so I touched base with him actually when I got home, and just learned a little bit more about him and just wanted to see how he was doing. And that's actually we started kind of hanging out, and that's where everything kind of started from there.
So your epilepsy brought you together.
Exactly. That's
yeah.
the silver lining there. Yeah.
The best silver lining ever.
Yeah.
So where were you when, Brittany, when you witnessed his first tonic-clonic seizure? Because you're right, they are incredibly difficult to watch. They can be violent and horribly scary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we had been dating for about a year already before I actually witnessed my first one. I'd seen some of like the myoclonic jerks, but I'd never actually witnessed a grand mal until about a year. So we had gone to Niagara Falls, and we went to go see a hip concert. And we were up late that night, got up early. He was having a rough day. We were wandering down to Clifton Hill to go for breakfast at one of those diners. And we sat down, ordered, and that's when he started to go into his first seizure that I saw.
And what was going through your mind at that point?
I was pretty terrified, I'm not gonna lie. You kind of jump into that role of what can I do, right? And we have talked about before in the past, like what I should do in those situations. And I just remember getting up and helping him from the chair onto the ground and just kind of helping his head so his head wasn't hitting the floor. And then he came to, and yeah, I remember the waiter coming up to me after he had come to and asking if we still wanted our order. I kind of laughed, like, really? No, we're going to go home now. We're not staying for breakfast.
Yeah.
But it was scary. And they're still scary, I'm not gonna lie. Like every time I see one, it's still terrifying to me. But I mean, I think that's just our life with it right now.
I don't think they ever get easier to witness.
No, they really
No.
don't.
Hi, this is Brandon from Cure Epilepsy. Did you know that 1 in 26 Americans will develop epilepsy in their lifetime? For more than 20 years, Cure Epilepsy has funded cutting-edge, patient-focused research. Learn more about our mission to end epilepsy at cureepilepsy.org. Now back to Seizing Life.
You had your seizures relatively under control, 2 or 3 of the tonic-clonics a year, and then there was an accident in your mid-20s. Tell us about that and how it impacted your seizures.
Yeah. So it was, as you mentioned, my seizures were very much so in my case under control. Having most 3 tonic-clonic seizures a year was great.
Which, by the way, sorry to interrupt you, but like, I say that and you repeated it, but 2 to 3 seizures is not under control. Like 2 or 3 tonic-clonic seizures should not be considered under control by any stretch of the imagination. Ideally we want complete and total seizure freedom, but I digress. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously 2 or 3 seizures a year or 2 to 3 seizures too many. And I totally understand that every patient's situation is different. Someone might look at having 15 or 20 tonic-clonic seizures a year being under control. And if that's under control for them, that's fantastic. As far as the workplace accident, I was I have very vague memory of what actually happened. But I was in my office. I had just been promoted within my company, so I moved my position. My office was now in Toronto, which was it was kind of a catch-22. I was really happy where I was building my career, but at the same time, I knew one of my major triggers was sleep deprivation. And this job, unfortunately, required me to wake up at 4:30 every morning, and I wouldn't get home until about 9:30 at night. So that, over the span of a few months, really took a toll on me. And I was suffering kind of an influx of myoclonic jerks. And then all of a sudden, I had a tonic-clonic seizure at work, and I was in the bathroom, and I guess I don't know if I was washing my hands, and I unfortunately kind of collapsed and hit my head off the side of the sink. And that is really kind of all I remember until I remember sitting at a table and kind of explaining to one of my colleagues that I'd had a seizure. And then it just kind of, again, my memory is so vague, but it's from there to being in an ambulance and then heading off to Toronto Western Hospital, which was the hospital I see my neurologist at now. It was pretty scary. So
Yeah, I can imagine. Was your work understanding? Have you had to deal with stigma at work?
yeah, I think it's one of those things where you pretty much have to deal with stigma surrounding epilepsy almost anywhere. It's just one of those conditions where I wish more people were educated behind it, because it is significantly more common than people are led to believe. Um, so there was stigma, and a lot of people, there were questions afterwards about the whole wooden spoon in the mouth. It's just like, well, that's the exact opposite of what you should do.
Mhm.
And it was simple things like that. My direct supervisor was, fortunately, he had seen and witnessed a few seizures in the past, so he was very understanding of it, which was it made the situation a little bit easier.
After that accident, your seizure activity increased. How did that affect your daily life?
It really changed everything on a day-to-day level. They're still under the same situation as that day about 6 years ago, where they're not under control right now. I'm suffering about anywhere between 3 and 5 tonic-clonics a month, and now, which I'd never suffered previously, were now several petite malls, and about anywhere between, I don't know what you would say, maybe 10 to 30 or 40 myoclonic jerks a day. So it can be pretty debilitating. But the day-to-day life were the things that I almost feel like I took for granted, and the things that I almost lose comfort in doing. We live within a walking distance to Georgian Bay, to the Great Lakes, but I don't feel comfortable being in the water, and I think rightfully so. I don't feel comfortable having a shower at home unless Britt is within an earshot. And it's just things like that we like to try to take as many precautions as we can, just to make it as safe as possible for not only me, but for Britt, for our family.
Which leads me to my next part of the interview is that, congratulations on your baby. She is 16 months old now. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
Very exciting.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have to imagine, given the increase in your seizures after that accident, that there was a lot of consideration and discussions between the two of you and your doctors before starting your family.
We actually, years ago, probably like 8 years ago, we went and did just genetic counseling to see what the odds would be for, if we were to have kids, what their chances would be to have epilepsy, just with Alek already being diagnosed with it. And it was only like an additional 1 or 2% more than the general population, which is still significant, but low enough that we felt comfortable to want to have a family. But with Alek, with being uncontrolled, we kind of put it off for a little while, to be honest, and just tried to get him healthy and feeling better. But it got to the point where in the end, a family is what we wanted, and we decided to go ahead with it. Yeah, and it was the best thing we ever did.
Yeah, it was previous to us actually having our daughter. My brother and sister-in-law had their first, and that was when my seizures initially were kind of not under control at all. And it was a pretty emotional time for me because with my niece, I didn't feel comfortable holding her, just in fear that something might happen. And it kind of broke my heart almost every day because it was something that I missed out on a big part of her life. And it really did make me question if I could be a father and be a supporting father and be around and be as hands-on as I want to be. So there were a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of conversations about it. And then it really came down to I would rather be a father with epilepsy than not be a father.
And what advice would you give to other couples who one or both of them have epilepsy and they want to start a family? What advice do you give them?
We live in a bungalow house, so we don't have to worry about stairs with him. With Charlie, also we've got like pack and play set up and just things in order that if he feels like something's not right, he can put her in a safe place. The one room that we hang out in all the time is completely baby proof. So if anything were to happen, we know that this room is completely safe for her. I mean, in the end, if a family is what you want, you can make changes and you can, lean on family. Family's there for a reason, right? They're there to support you. They want to be there.
Have you done genetic testing? I know you mentioned seeing a genetic counselor, but do you know a genetic cause or a brain formation issue that is causing your epilepsy?
So we did genetic testing. It was about it was 2 years ago, I guess.
2 years ago.
Yeah, something like that. And we went through the family tree and did some blood work, a little bit of everything. And unfortunately, it didn't come up with any answers that we were looking for, unfortunately, which kind of left me with more questions. Because that was one of the things that I was really hoping for. It sounds strange to say it, but it's almost like you wish someone either within your family or a close friend also suffers with seizures, just so they can empathize with what you're going through. And unfortunately, with the genetic testing, we came out empty-handed. But we're staying optimistic that hopefully we'll find some answers soon.
Absolutely. I always recommend going back and doing genetic testing every few years, because my goodness, that science is just moving forward in leaps and bounds, and it's so exciting to see.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned that when you were younger, you weren't as knowledgeable about your epilepsy, but you have gotten significantly more involved in the epilepsy community in the last few years. Talk to us about what motivated you to become an advocate.
The story can actually be connected to my mom. We all recently relocated to our current area in Ontario, and my mom started up a conversation with me and asked, "Do you know if there's any epilepsy support groups at all within our region?" And I wasn't aware at that point, so it was a quick Google search just to find out that the last epilepsy support group, or really anything, was about, I believe it was 2 years prior. And I mean, we're an area of 200,000 people. So it's kind of mind-boggling that there wouldn't ever be just even a seminar bi-monthly or quarterly, just to kind of gather people together and talk about living with epilepsy and what has changed for them. So when we noticed that there was a very, very dire need for it and lack of it, we just decided to start social media platforms, and it really just started as a blog and me talking about my story, living with it, and Britt telling her story about being a spouse with someone with uncontrolled seizures, and then fortunately that just kind of snowballed, and we had dozens of families reach out and tell their story, and it was amazing. It was something that we didn't really expect. We didn't know who was going to kind of connect with us, but we just figured even if we connected with one family and made them realize that they weren't alone in this, that would have been perfect. So every other additional family or patient that was just gravy for us.
I imagine, you had talked about how much it can help that there was no one in your family who had epilepsy that could understand it. So I can only imagine how important having that community around you is. Brittany, I wonder, as the spouse, so much of the attention is placed on Alek and his disease, but this absolutely affects your everyday life as well. And I wonder how having that community of understanding families benefited you as well.
It's been pretty amazing. Like, I've had so many people come out and talk to me about their situations with epilepsy, whether it's loved ones themselves or just friends, and just having even that communication, once people are aware of what we're a part of, people kind of come out of the woodworks and start talking a little bit more that they probably would have never talked or expressed about before. So it's been actually really nice in that aspect, because you're right, people don't usually think about everybody else involved. They always think about the person suffering, but it is very much the whole family that is affected by it. And so it's been really amazing, and much more support than I ever thought that we would have gotten.
So Alek, Brittany, tell me about how you found Epilepsy Canada and what it was about their organization that inspired you to want to work with them.
So with the kind of overflowing support of within our social media and from the community, we just tried to figure out a way that we could do a little bit more in any which way. And we eventually reached out and got in touch with Gary Collins from Epilepsy Canada. And over half a dozen conversations, we were trying to figure out a way to really bring something to this region where it's very much needed. And there were talks about walkathons and just any real event that we could do. And it was later determined that we were going to be hosting a golf day, something that would just be family friendly and no competition really. It's just something that would be fun for anybody of any skill level. And it went over significantly better than we had ever kind of envisioned. We didn't really have, I think our original goal was if we could raise maybe $10,000 for epilepsy research, that would be fantastic. And we actually nearly hit $18,000
Wow.
to raise for epilepsy research. And I guess with my situation, with having uncontrolled seizures, epilepsy research to me just seemed almost like a no-brainer, and that's not a pun intended. It was just one of those things where if someone else can go through life not, or at least finding a medication that works for them and helps control their seizures, that's all we want. That's really the main goal.
Yeah.
So
yeah, research is so important to us. I mean, that's how Alek hopefully will be able to control the seizures one day, and we stay optimistic that that's going to happen. And so for us, raising money towards research was number one. Yeah.
You guys, thank you so much. You are an inspiration, and I don't mean that in some cliche way. I am genuinely motivated by the two of you, and what you've done for your community, I think is pretty remarkable. So thank you again for talking with us today. I so appreciate you sharing your time. Give that little girl some extra cuddles and snuggles, and I hope to be able to see you guys in person someday.
oh, thank you so much for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you, Alek and Brittany, for sharing your experiences with us and for your efforts to raise awareness and funds for epilepsy research. Cure Epilepsy and Epilepsy Canada have entered into a strategic working relationship that formally commenced in January. This partnership will further both organizations' ability to advance epilepsy research and find a cure. We hope that you will support our mission to end epilepsy by visiting cureepilepsy.org/donate. Your support and generosity are greatly appreciated. Thank you.